Good evening, everyone. It is my joy, see what I did there, to welcome you to Talking Volumes with Ross Gay, our grand finale of the 2022 season. My name is Kelly Gordon. I'm a producer at NPR, especially for all things Kerri Miller, which is the best part of my job. I am here tonight to thank our sponsors, especially since this is the grand finale, Becker Furniture World and Bremer Bank. And we also have, I believe, maybe a group from Scholastica College. Is that true here tonight? Because they're one of our educational sponsors, and we thank them too, and also Luther College. So I wanted to let you know, if you are not aware, that tonight Ross Gay will be signing books here on stage once he and Kerri are done talking. So if you have not already gotten a book, they're also for sale in the lobby. You can bring it, buy it, bring it, have it be signed, greet him. That would be fantastic. You know, of course, Talking Volumes is a partnership with the Star Tribune, so I'd like to bring out right now my colleague from the Star Tribune, Rohan Preston. There's Rohan, yes.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Rohan. Okay, so tell us what's going on at the Star Tribune. What would you like these readers to know?
So first of all, I have to say we're delighted to be in partnership with you, the Star Tribune. I listen to all of these. I don't always get to come, so I'm delighted to be here. And I want to say that we have coming up on the 27th, the Books Guide. Lori Herzl selects a lot of wonderful books for us, and she also is this coming Sunday is talking about how she selects books for review and how she selects features and so on and so forth. So we have quite a bit happening. I'm very thankful, and the Star Tribune is very thankful to all these great readers. We love you guys.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
We do. Very interested, very engaged readership.
Curious people.
And tonight is going to be fun. When I interviewed Ross, he was. I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but he was so engaging. I felt like I was just talking, just capturing poetry. So It was really wonderful. So
that's fantastic. And that article that you're talking with Ross Gay is in the Star Tribune too. So if you haven't read that already, you can go back and read that.
And you can read it in your program, I believe.
Okay. Yes. Oh, that's right. They're in the program. So fantastic. Which is a great way. I love to also kind of the same thing. I love to read the articles with the authors because there's really no spoiler. There's a myriad of things that you learn from all the different directions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Star Tribune. We really appreciate it. All right. We will get the fun started. Please welcome award-winning journalist Kerri Miller from NPR.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Cal. I have a question for you. Has anyone arrived tonight with their full complement of joy? Like, I don't need more joy. Don't give me more joy. I don't need, anybody? Anybody want to stand up and declare they don't need more joy? Oh, you're a bunch of chickens. I just have to say that if ever there was an urgent need for joy, right? Third autumn of a global plague, on the eve of an election, in a country fiercely and furiously at odds. Dare I go on or no? Okay, you get it. Joy, our guest says, is not some rarefied sanctuary that you achieve in a Zen-like state. It's messy and it's tangled and it's got pain and suffering and sorrow. Tonight, Ross Gay is bringing delight and exuberance and gladness into the room, and we are so very happy that he's here. His new book is titled Inciting Joy. Please give him the warmest welcome to the stage of the Fitzgerald Theater. Does anybody show up at these with like, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't need more joy. Right?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably not.
Do you? Do you ever show up going, you know, I've got all the joy that I'm ever going to need?
It's funny, like, or even it's probably good. That's a good question because it gets into that kind of the definition of joy, which I don't think of as a thing you get.
Right.
You know, I think of a thing you kind of enter or join.
Right.
You know.
Tell me more.
Well, let me just define in a way,
Okay.
and I can say like the reason I started writing this book, or like one of the impeti, was I was frequently sort of encountering people. You know, I have a book called Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. It's a book of poems, and then this book called The Book of Delights. That was nice. And this other book, and you know, like people would ask the question, and they would be like, you know, like, and everything's going on like this, you know, and like, just how can we be talking about joy right now? That question. And to me, I was like, okay, you know, trying to like figure out that thing. And I write about this in the introduction, like, especially when young people, young writers, young people, period, I don't care, would say things like, you know, I've been told by whoever that joy is not a serious emotion, implying it's not a rigorous thing too. And I was thinking, in addition to sort of like less kind things, I was thinking like, oh, you have the wrong definition of joy. You have a definition of what you're calling joy is not joy, and what I think of as joy is something like, you know, for now, something like the light that emanates from us when we help each other carry our sorrows. And given as everyone, it's my experience anyway, is heartbroken at some point, everyone, it seems to me that joy is one of the things that, you know, given that everyone is heartbroken, and we might also kind of practice acknowledging that and tending to that, it seems to me that joy is something that, one, is rigorous as hell, because in order to do that, you have to do something. But two, it's, you know, it's in a way, it's sort of available, you know, and I don't, you know, it's sort of like if we're all heartbroken, joy is, it's something that is available to all of us.
You know, I was wondering if I was reading some cognitive research on this, and there is a theory out there that some people have a combination of genes and chemistry, and they just have kind of a biological set point for joy. And other people don't. And I wonder what you're looking skeptical about that.
I mean, I would wonder what their definition actually of joy is.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Right.
because, you know, like it's weird, but I sort of, it's not weird that I think about these things, but it's weird that I think about these things definitionally.
Yeah.
And it's weird to me. And I think of things like delight or happiness as occasional. It's occurring to me more, like as I try to sort of think harder about these things, it's occasional. You know, like you might be, you know, like I was driving up here and I got really good Ethiopian food on the way up. I was really happy about that. It delighted me.
Uh-huh.
But it wasn't connected to joy. You know, it could in some way be connected to joy, I suppose. But that feeling of happiness was not joy. So I wonder if that those researchers talking about genetic this and that are talking about occasional experiences of like, you know, someone tells you, hey, you look cute, you know, out the window, you know. That made me glad when that woman said something like, oh, I love your shorts and your whatever.
Uh-huh.
That put some pep in my step.
Right.
But I don't know that it was joy, you know.
I think, as I think about how you're talking about the definition of it, I'm thinking, I think people think that if you really know joy, that it's not ephemeral, that you, like you were saying, you enter into a state and then you're just infused with all this joy and you know how to recapture it, you exist in this state, more than just these fleeting experiences of joy.
Well, I wonder about that. You know, I feel like my own experiences, by the way, like a very important essay to this book is Zadie Smith's essay, Joy. where she talks about joy as sort of, I don't know if she says it exactly like this, but requires the intolerable
Yes.
for its existence. But I think, it's interesting because I think the experience of joy is often, like a reasonable experience of joy is like that you might weep, if someone comes to your aid and you are devastated and you can't do a thing, and someone comes to your aid, you might weep at the care that, has been provided to you. And the weeping might be evidence, it might have been occasioned by the devastation and the tending that came after it. You know what I'm saying? So in a way, like that's another way of sort of, I guess I'm asking the question of like, I'm just continuing to call it to question, like, how does it happen? Do we, to be at a sort of permanent, I think you're exactly right. It seems to me that joy is a state, like, or joy is sort of, I said this the other day, but I'm gonna say it again, like, there's a beautiful movie about Philip Glass, and he's talking about, like, someone asks him about if he ever wonders about where the music's gonna come from, whether or not it's gonna come. And he says there's like a river underground, and I can just dip a thing into it. I just know that now. And it feels to me like that's also the case with joy. Though I think the question is like, how do we practice? I mean, obviously the question of this book is like, how do we incite that in ourselves? And then the second question is like, what might that incite in each other?
How much do you think it's connected with a sense of belonging?
Huge. I'm so glad you said that. It was weird. Like I was in a signing line the other day, and she was a psychologist, I think, and I can't remember how it came up, but she said, but she said something. I was like, oh yeah. Reading these essays, you'd think I totally had this. Like this would be the first thing I started off on, but like that it is always about belonging. I don't know always. I don't at all. Let me just say too, like I'm not interested in being any kind of like, wise person on joy, just to be clear. Not my thing.
But we are looking to you for wisdom.
Sorry.
So.
But I got some good similes in here,
Good.
But the thing is like absolutely like this experience of even when I'm talking about this definition, the feeling, again, let me use another metaphor because I can't see you. I'm going to trust that you're there. I can hear you. That there's like, if there were, because there are, something running between us that is something like mycelium in a healthy forest, and it's there. Whether or not we acknowledge it, it's there. And to me, in a way, joy is like when it periodically becomes luminous to us. And that might, like you look down and you're like, oh, that's right, we're all connected. Right. And that, it happens in all these different ways. I talk about this community orchard that I've been a part of. Right. And that was a moment in my life where it felt, it wasn't like just a happy feeling. It was a feeling of like, and we might get to this too, it's a feeling sort of like falling apart, Yeah.
I want to talk about the orchard a little more in a minute, but it makes a lot of sense to hear when you think about that sense of belonging and you think about what can catalyze a sense of belonging, a terrible tragedy, something that we experience collectively or individually, but you find someone that knows what that means and what that is. I mean, a lot of the times, if joy equals in some ways a sense of belonging, you're reaching for people at some of the lowest, most difficult times of your life and seeking that belonging, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, given that we all have the lowest, most difficult times of our lives, often, sometimes several times.
Yeah.
It's like we're always in the position to practice that,
right,
that experience. And if we trust that each other has the lowest, most difficult times of our lives, again, we're sort of always in the position to practice that, And there's a way too, like I also wonder about too, like the other day yesterday I was walking and I was just like, witnessing. Like one of the things that I think that Delights book taught me real good is just to be paying attention to these minor caretakings that are perpetually underway, constantly.
Okay, give us an
know.
example. What
Well, I
did
was
you
just-
see yesterday?
I mean, 1,000 things, but like I was walking. One, this is great. Did I tell you this? I was reading at the American Writers Museum in Chicago, and I came, I came out of the elevator, and there were 3 people there. You know, these 2 women and a younger guy, and the guy was like, "Hey, you want some French fries?" And I said, "No, I'm good." And then he said, "Who knew?" He said, "There are 5 guys," and I said, "Oh yeah, hell yeah."
Give me those fries.
Yeah, they.
Right.
And it was just such a sort of sweet moment of generosity that was so many things. It was just like, yo, you want to share what I have?
Right.
You know? Or, you know, on the way over, I was, there was someone in a wheelchair approaching a place that didn't have one of the door openers, the accessible handles. And this kid who was wearing the thing, so already probably to some degree under the sway of the alienation mechanisms. Not that I have an opinion about that.
I know, right. Oh, what do you mean?
But saw that this person could use a hand with the door and did it
Oh.
and just walked on. It was like nothing. Every day, a zillion times a day. You know, I feel like those, I don't know, like I feel like being in the midst of those, and there's something about witnessing those, training one's eyes on those. It feels very important to me and connected to this joy thing. I'm not exactly sure how, except that I do suspect that part of this understanding that there is, in fact, that web between us requires witnessing the ways that it's in evidence all the time, every day.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this because you see people so tuned inwardly, whatever they're listening to, and they're not doing what you talked about with this. I'm observing and witnessing, and I'm looking for caretakings, and I'm looking for these moments to see, to see people leaning on one another. When you observe a community, on a street, on a given street, and so many people are turned inward, I'm curious about what occurs to you about that.
Well, it occurs to me in some part that there is a concerted effort to alienate us from one another.
Yes.
Constantly. It feels like our devices, are useful for that, obviously. But it seems like there's other stuff that's really, really good at that. And what's remarkable to me is despite this intense, pressure for us to kind of pay no attention or maybe even be afraid of each other. Mm-hmm. There's all the time, there's people like looking out for each other, taking care of each other.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about the orchard.
Yeah.
Because when you discovered this, it seems like it was somewhat of an open canvas here. It was raw material. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what it was at the beginning.
This is the Bloomington Community Orchard is this kind of collaborative orchard that exists in Bloomington. If you go there, you should stop by. It's never locked. The gates doesn't have a lock. It was the idea of someone named Amy Countryman, a dear friend, who actually did like an undergraduate thesis project. She was a slightly older undergraduate student, and she did a thesis project on like food security and stuff. And she decided to sort of propose an urban orchard. And her advisor was connected to the urban forester. The urban forester said, great project. If you can show community support, we'll like let you use this acre across from the YMCA. That's where it is when you come. And she had this call out. I don't know, maybe 100 people showed up. And then we very quickly, there was...
Wait a minute, were you part of the original 100 that showed up?
Yeah, I just showed up.
Oh.
And I want you to know, too, I don't know that I would have... I heard about it in a newspaper. There's these things called newspapers. my buddy, usually we used to have a writing group and we'd get together and do poems and stuff. But this guy, he would always read the sports pages before, and he happened to read some other stuff, and he showed me this call-out meeting, which I probably would have missed, huge. But anyway, so then we broke into teams, and it was huge. It was very non-hierarchical from the start, a lot of consensus, and then the teams were things like a media team, like people who had to kind of drum up support. And then there was like maybe an education team, and then like the site prep team. And that's what I was on. And then we had to like decide what kind of trees we were going to get and what kind of other supplemental plants we were going to get. And, which trees would thrive in our climate and all of this stuff, which meant we had to call in the elders and the people who had more experience. And it was multi-generational, and it was, as wonderful a kind of project, and 8 months, 9 months, 10 months later, there was an orchard planted,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
what
those people,
sense of belonging, huh?
Oh my God. I was living in the town for like 2 years, and then I got involved in this project. And I knew none of those people before I started. And some of those people are like, my dearest friends, it was so beautiful. It was so inefficient. It was so inefficient. We had these meetings. Well, first of all, we had to turn like, the site was kind of, it was denuded. It was like, just like been lawn mowed.
It was grass.
Yeah, it was grass, and it didn't have much tilth to it. And so we were constantly making compost. We were turning literal tons of cow shit, all the time. Hours and hours, 10, 15 hours a week. A lot of us would be doing that. And then there were these meetings, and the meetings would be easily 3-hour meetings. And,
really?
Oh, easily. And these were like people, I didn't have kids, but people had kids, so which meant that the meetings required other people to be taking care of stuff so that the stuff could happen. Like there was so much care that had to happen in order for the stuff to get done.
Wow.
And, there would be potlucks, and we'd like go off track because we didn't know how to have meetings. And it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. Yeah. Another chapter, this might be one of your questions. It might not be. It might be one of your questions. I'm going to answer it now. People ask sometimes, like, what are some of the other chapters you'd write if you could write more chapters in this Inciting Joy book?
Oh.
From your face, it looks like that wasn't one of your questions.
That was not one of my questions, no. I think that's kind of an odd question, but okay. I assume you put it all on the page, but no. Okay.
And one would be like inefficiency and joy.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now that we're down that road, what about it?
Well, it's just, again, it's sort of like there's such a kind of, value to efficiency, and so much efficiency and streamlining means removing the hands that touch a thing before it gets done. I was thinking, like, you could like go from if you wanted to ride an airplane, if you wanted to fly somewhere, you could do so much in your life without touching another human being.
Yeah.
And someone somewhere thinks that's a good idea. But that, some people would be like, well, that's streamlined, cash soon will be no more,
Right.
Some people think that's a good idea. That's a terrible idea for a lot of reasons and I'll just leave it on the one level, which is that there's this old thing that we do, which is like hand things back and forth to one another, that matters, like the paper menu is actually a valuable thing. If for no other reason, I mean, one thing that's cool about it is that you can point to your friend what you might be eating. It's an actual thing. The other thing that's important is that you get to hand it back and say thank you,
Right. I was curious about whether this, being part of the orchard on the ground level, made you see this community, not just the people that you were gathering with, but the character of the community in a different way?
Well, I mean, it's a great question. I think I probably liked my town fine, but I think I probably didn't feel necessarily like I belonged there. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably true. And I feel like working on that project, which is so moving for so many reasons, but one of them is that we mostly didn't know each other, and we were working on something, an idea that was a love. We loved the idea of the call of the orchard was free fruit for all. We loved that idea. And we were joining together to work toward that idea for the benefit of people we couldn't actually imagine.
Right.
You know?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Some of those people might be us, but some of those, some of the people who were instrumental in the orchard are died in the meantime, in the time between shortly after the planting. It was like before the trees were producing, and that's really moving to me. And to get to do a thing like that is again, it's sort of a profoundly disalienating experience, a profound experience of belonging. Yeah.
I mean, you can see what a community values.
Yeah.
And it had to be really fulfilling to see not only here's the acre,
Yeah.
but here's the support and here's all these people. And maybe suddenly you see, I didn't know much. I don't know how much you knew about Bloomington before you moved there, Indiana, but
Yeah.
suddenly maybe you're seeing it in a whole new way.
1,000%. Yeah. It's like again, like I said, I moved there for work and I liked it, but I didn't feel deep in the community.
Yeah.
But that experience, it not only changed my relationship to the town fundamentally, really because in a way I became, it's an interesting thing. It's a great question. My job was with the university.
Right.
In a way, there's a way that those university jobs can sometimes not incline you to be deeply ingrained in the town. There's something about them, and partly is that a lot of people get the jobs and then they leave, So, that's sort of how I got there. I had friends and stuff, and I was sort of, figuring my way out into being in the town. But that thing of the orchard itself changing my relationship to the community, in part because it changed for me what I was thinking of as the community. Now I was suddenly like, oh, this community is the place where we build these orchards.
Yeah.
Where we dream together about people we don't know, but we love them anyway.
Is there a part of the orchard that exerts a particular gravitational pull on you?
Great. Yeah, that's good. What are you thinking? What do you mean?
I guess I mean, when you walk into this beautiful, lush, quiet place, do you find that you are drawn to a corner or a
That's great.
tree?
Have you been there? It's like you're asking, you know it. That's why I'm asking, what do you know? You know so much about me. I walk in the door and I make a left and I go to Mr. Lau's figs, which I transplanted from my best friend's dad's garden. Yeah. It's in the corner.
What's it like?
It's in the corner. It's an abundantly, the sort of leaves are very abundant. It has a hard time making fruit. We got to figure that out. But it grows beautifully. It's a very hardy and very healthy fig tree that I took cuttings of from my best friend Jay's dad's garden back outside of Philadelphia. Yeah, I always go there, and it's like, hey, Mr. Lau, how's it going?
That's the other thing I wondered, is whether you have a particular love or appreciation for some of the trees or plants that, well, they need some help. They're not thriving like the show-off apple trees that produce,
Yeah. No, I don't think I do. I don't think I do.
I don't care about the underside.
As a gardener, I'll tell you, I'm the older I get as a gardener, the more practice. I'm a baby gardener. I've only been doing it 15 years. I feel like I'm learning the things that I'm inclined to grow are the things that really want to grow.
Oh.
Why
is that?
I don't know. Why do I want? There's a kind of tussle that, maybe I'm lazy. I don't know. The thing is, once you call dandelion a crop, you're a great gardener.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
true. I'd like to ask you to read the first essay, and if you will, tell us a little bit about a little bit of the context of this essay.
And this is the from the orchard. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sort of talking about this community orchard, and I'm the Bloomington Community Orchard, and I'm at this point in the essay, I'm sort of talking about my ambivalence in a certain kind of way with, the footprint that we put on the earth, actually, the way that we sort of linger on after us, which sometimes among, among writer types and other types for sure, people want to do things that last forever. And I'm sort of calling into question whether or not that's a good idea, regardless of what you do. So maybe I'll start there. And it is a funny thing to realize or to contend with this investment or belief in the future, because I've been almost ethically disinclined from making plans for the future, or at least I have fancied myself so. I mean, yeah, right, I eat a lot of greens and exercise and try to remember to floss. I wash down my vitamins, D3 and K2, C and B12, with a quart glass jar of water with a pinch of salt, lemon, magnesium, along with my kettlebells and push-ups and jump rope every single day. We could start there. We might say that constitutes planning for the future. Though it's also true, those plans extend only to the hopefully forestalled end of my life. So maybe what I resist or even hate, and the hatred is probably indication that a little bit I want it too, is the imposition of oneself into the future beyond one's lifetime. The fantasy of immortality, the pursuit that I can't help but think of as the outsourcing or offloading of death. Your disprivilege, your destitution, for my life everlasting. I even gave a pretty good talk about this. There's a little essay somewhere. It's called, good title, Body, Musics, and the Empire of Time. And I suggest that maybe it's not such a good idea for us to want to take up space into the future, to impose our art, our lives, our anything through time. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should just do our work for the here and now. Well, I'm afraid we don't really have a choice in the matter, turns out. Bummer. What we do in the here and now exists already beneath your boot soles in the future. Look for me there. Look for me when you turn on your air conditioner. Look for me when the hurricane is coming. Look for me as this virus that used to live in the depths of the forest enters your body. Look for me when you're having an asthma attack. Look for me when the parched tree snaps into flame. Look for me as you run, taking only your skin with you. Look for me as you build your boat. Look for me in the wreckage. Or look for me in the orchard. Though I didn't yet have the words for it, planting that orchard, by which I mean, you know this by now, joining my labor to the labor by which it came to be, reminded me, or illuminated to me, a matrix of connection, of care, that exists not only in the here and now, but comes to us from the past and extends forward into the future. A rhizomatic care I so often forget to notice I am every second in the midst of, by which I came to be and am at all, despite every single lie to the contrary, despite every single action born of that lie. We are in the midst of rhizomatic care that extends in every direction, spatially, temporally, spiritually, you name it. It's certainly not the only thing we're in the midst of, but it's the truest thing by far. Which, well, no duh, when I was leaving the orchard after the planting day, where about 250 people showed up to midwife the trees into the ground, water them, mulch them, a baby I saw dancing on one of them, a couple college-looking kids I saw kissing theirs. I took care of Mr. Lyles. I put it in the ground. I replaced the soil. I patted the fig in. Mr. Lyles' fig I patted in like a baby. And I walked out the gate Jack made that had no lock on it. And I hugged and kissed every one of us on my way. Amy, the longest. She brought us here, just as she was brought here. Well, No duh, my eyes filled up, and inside my chest was a lifting off of goldfinch and cardinal and flamingo and a choir of apples and plums and peaches and service berries, and I felt like I was breaking apart into something not me, because I was.
Beautiful.
Fount of the river, 3 foot by 3. I can cross over so easily. What's to become of this trickling stream? Answers are only known in God's dreams. For the MISSIPPI, oh me, oh my, for the MISSIPPI, oh me, oh my, oh me, oh my. Young river, trying to breathe. You've gotten bigger, but your waters ain't deep. Little by little, you're picking up steam. But don't be impatient, 'cause growing ain't cheap. For the MISSIPPI, oh me, oh my, for the MISSIPPI, oh me, oh my, oh me, oh my. Oh, rushing river, shake hands with the sea. You've carried your cargo from point A to point B. From cold Minnesota on through Tennessee, finally ending up in the Big Easy. Oh, the MISSIPPI, oh me, oh my, oh the MISSIPPI, oh me, oh mighty river, wash over me. Let your currents remind me of the powers that be, and how all of the greatness that lies inside me has to
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. That was beautiful. But, oh my gosh, that is absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Put music to that. Oh.
Thank you.
Wow.
I appreciate that.
So tell me about hearing that. He's speechless.
It was amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was incredible.
oh my God.
God, I know.
Damn, that was beautiful. And it also made me think I was actually sort of thinking, well, what is this like sort of the occasion of seeing someone sing so beautifully?
Right.
And sort of there's something about performance and like, just like stunningly beautiful performance, and also that I could go on, but it made me think, oh, there is some way of like being the witness to the body, which is always a body changing in time and space, is always sort of indication of that thing, that thing, which is that we are not here forever. Making that song is itself a kind of treatise on joy. There's something about that, I was thinking, goddamn, that was so beautiful.
It's just great. You're listening to Talking Volumes at the Fitzgerald Theater. Our guest tonight on our season finale is Ross Gay, and his new book is titled Inciting Joy. You and I were talking about something interesting in the downstairs before we came out. You were talking a little bit about the beginning of as a poet, getting out there on the road, doing readings. Tell me a little bit about what that was like, and then what you learned about yourself in your just determination to see this through.
Well, I think it was my first book, Against Which, came out in 2006, and that was what we were talking about in part was, this kind of tour. I'm on a tour right now, and it's very organized, and like people show up sometimes, But when you're hustling a first book, when I was, probably not everyone, and kind of like there was a cohort of us, and it was just the way you did it. Like you just went anywhere. If someone like asked you to read at like the birthday party, it was almost like that, And so like I was saying that we would probably read like 50 readings in a year. One of my friends, I think, had 180 readings the year his book came out,
A book of poetry.
A book of poems, yeah. In part because poems get moved. You sell poems when you give readings, for the most part. And we wanted to share our work. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of what it was like.
Yeah. Now
what did you learn about yourself with, I don't care if it takes 5 more years of 50 readings a year, I want people to hear these poems. So what did you learn about yourself on that?
Probably many things. I don't know about like determination or any of those things. I'd have to think harder about that. But one thing that I do think I can say I learned for sure is like something about listening to an audience. Like when you read a lot, if you learn how to hear an audience hearing. I think that's what people who can perform a little bit can do. And if you give like 50 readings in a year, sometimes those readings are like to 2 people, literally. One of them's your best friend, and the other person's who invited you. By the way, I'm never gonna have a podcast, but if I did, maybe I will. I would, one podcast, periodically I have these ideas. Periodically I have an idea. And a podcast idea would be like just people coming on and talking about their worst reading. The worst reading they ever. Oh my God, because they can be they're just great stories, like stuff that you couldn't imagine. And then it's like, wait, and then so you did another reading next week? Like you didn't hang it up? Everyone just keeps on reading, we just all take it.
Well, what is your worst experience?
I don't know about my worst. Like I've made some errors in my choice of reading material.
Okay, like what?
Well, one time I read an essay that is to me, it's a really moving essay from the Book of Delights, and it's called Cocoa Baby, and it's about it's basically about witnessing, catching sight of myself putting coconut oil on my body. And it becomes a kind of witnessing of a kind of care for one's self, whom one so often is not nice to. Mm-hmm. And I say testicles twice, and I say penis. I say, which with adults is like not a big thing.
Yes.
And I read it at this thing called the Dodge Poetry Festival in New Jersey on high school day. It was such a weird. It was such a weird choice. And I thought, I was like, because I have a little bit of like a little thing of like wanting to be naughty. So it's like, it's a poetry festival. I'm going to read an essay. And to me, I'm like, I'm going to read this essay that's going to really connect with these children. And I swear to you. I mean, it was huge. It was probably like 800, it was probably like 800. It's like, it was the biggest reading I've ever given. But I have another one too. God, I have another terrible reading story too. And I'm going to tell it.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell it.
Good.
So the first time I get to testicles, they go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You hear it in the audience, And then I say testicles again, and they're like, yo, easy. And then by the time they say penis, they're like, no. But I just had to like go through it. I just had to do it,
Oh my gosh.
But this
funny.
other reading I gave, it's one of my favorite readings. I write about it in this book. It was such a weird choice also. It was for a fundraiser for the biggest kind of food pantry in our town. And it's a big event. It's a really big event. And it's called the Soup Bowl. And I didn't know how big of an event it was, but I think maybe also like hundreds and hundreds of people. It could be 600 people. It's a lot of people. And it, maybe not exactly my audience, the people who I'm used to who go with me. It was like people who were there actually for the fundraiser. They weren't there for me.
Yeah.
And they asked me to do it. They're like, yeah, Russ Gay's a poet in town, and read a thing. So I have this essay, and it's called, what's the title of it? The title of it might be Steve Jobs. I swear to God. That might be the title of the essay. And then that's the subject of the essay. When some places that'd be a hit, I got off the stage, and I'm used to people after I read for the most part, giving me a good job look, I remember there was a guy sitting right there man, he was just he wouldn't even look at me. He was glaring past me. He was glaring like that. And then I got back to the table and I told my partner, I was like, hey, I think that was the wrong one to read.
And she said,
you did a good job.
Oh. What you want, she's got your back. I want to ask you about what you've written about teaching, because as noted when we were chatting beforehand, it's so candid, and I think a lot of teachers would say it privately, but not the way you say it. So, one of the things I was curious about in reading that, you write about how teachers struggle to hang on to their joy, and
there's a teacher laughing over there.
yeah. How many teachers are in the room tonight? Oh. Okay, good. Yeah, you got to read that. And then, what I wondered is what happens, and this firsthand, what happens to, all the idealism and the delight and joy that a new teacher enters the classroom with in the beginning?
I can say what happens for me, and I want to say too before I even get started that this thinking in this essay is really deep in conversation and kind of riffing on a book called The Undercommons by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten that completely changed my life and is still changing my life. It's my experience was that it took me a couple years to realize wait, there's something miserable about this.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why, because I like the insurance. I like the salary. I like the insurance. And I slowly started realizing I wasn't realizing I was realizing, I was feeling it. I guess that's the word for that. And I would, when it was grading time, especially, I would be miserable and I would feel guilty and I would feel like bad about myself. And I'd be partly because I would be like, I can just say why, because I was spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to detract points from human beings.
Wow.
And then I was sort of like, as I started, got exposed to, Harney and Moten's work. And then of course, other people who have been important to me, Noam Chomsky talks about education and the failures of certain kinds of schooling, and other people who are important to me. I started to realize this grading situation, not only the grading thing, but this sort of compulsion to evaluate is really a compulsion to fix. And the compulsion to fix requires that, everyone's, in a way they're wrong, that they're wrong. And so the rubrics, I was starting to witness my rubric. I would teach these big 105 student intro to creative writing classes, and I'd have, assistant TAs. And we would have these meetings. And the meetings would effectively be, and I had, because it was a big class and I had TAs, I had to write a very, very detailed syllabus, which is not actually my mode. And really not my mode. And I realized that really the sort of main emphasis was figuring out how we could dock the students.
Wow.
That was the main thing. What they learned was way secondary. The real thing was well, how can we grade them? And when we say how can we grade them, it was how can we knock points off of their scores? And that just felt bad. That just felt bad.
But you also have some pretty candid things to say about the students themselves and maybe what the infrastructure of teaching does to them. I mean, you say, as far as I can tell, at least in school and school-adjacent activity, they are used to and perhaps most comfortable with being told what to do and told what to be.
Yeah, and I would say we, because I was a student too.
Yeah.
And I feel that's sort of the result of a particular kind of teaching where the objective is not to learn, but the objective is to do what the instructor wants you to do, or what the test needs you to do, or the whatever needs you to do. If you're rewarded for doing the thing that you're told to do the best, that's, a certain kind of kid is going to do that and do that really well. The other thing about the grading that is just miserable to me, and I don't know if this probably came later, is that it's compelling people to compete in the class, which doesn't feel, I should just say it like this. Actually, I started to realize at some point, I was oh, okay, so the essay is called Dispatch from the Ruins, and it's a riff on this, also a riff on a really beautiful book by Anna Singh called Mushroom at the End of the World, I think. Something in Late Capitalist Ruins is what it's called. It's a great book. It's a great book. And, but I realized there's this thing, how do you teach if you're teaching in a kind of collapse?
Right.
Whatever. There's many collapses happening many times all around in various ways. But say there's a kind of collapse or several collapses we're in the midst of. Do I want to teach my students to do exactly what I think they should do? Okay, no, I don't. Do I want to teach my students to try to steal the best grades from their neighbors? No, I don't. What I want to teach them to do is to care about one another. Mm-hmm. That's the main thing. If I want them to care about each other and make beautiful stuff, it's a different story. Grading has nothing to do with that. There's no there's no way that the grade could factor usefully into that requirement for the class. I'd love to hear someone try to convince me otherwise, and I'd be open to it. I'd really be open to it. But I've thought about a lot of the ways, and I don't think it works. I don't think it works.
So the way you solved this was to follow the lead, I think, of some other teachers, and everybody gets an A.
Yeah, everyone gets A's. And, you know, like I say in the essay, like if I could like flick a button and no grades, that's what we do, you know. But everyone gets an A. And then you just, from the start, and then like what? Now we can actually do stuff. It's amazing, you know? We can actually do stuff. Like you can actually, another thing that a classroom is interesting to me for, or like a sort of dreamy classroom, is like a place where we're sort of mutually bewildered. And we can care for each other's bewilderment, you know, and tend to each other's bewilderment, which you don't do by telling people they got to do something a specific way. You actually kill their bewilderment.
Boy, that's really profound. It is. It makes, when you put it like that, it makes so much sense, and there's so little room for that in education.
Totally.
Well, I mean, in daily life, pretty much.
In daily
right?
life. In daily life. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Another beautiful essay called Bewilderment by Fannie Howe. I recommend it.
And by Richard Powers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Pretty cool, too.
Is it?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like you, if you would read a poem, and
Oh, yeah.
if you'll tell us a little bit about how you chose this. I think we gave you 3,
Yeah.
and you chose this one.
Yeah. This is called Sorrow Is Not My Name, and I thought it was kind of interesting because actually I'm not going to ruin it, but the next thing that you want me to read, which I want to read, it's okay, it's okay, is also about sorrow, but I think this is an interesting sort of maybe conversation about it. I thought that when you asked about it. It's called Sorrow Is Not My Name, and it's after a Gwendolyn Brooks poem called To the Young Who Want to Die, which I cite almost the whole poem in the sorrow essay.
Yes.
Yeah, well done. Sorrow is not my name. No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid deep sleep awaits, there is a time for everything. Look, just this morning a vulture nodded his red, grizzled head at me, and I looked at him, admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up, and after arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off, just like that. And to boot, there are on this planet alone something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things, some with names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees. Agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that. The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah. But look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel, and at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember. My color's green. I'm spring.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. This came up when we were chatting, is somehow these essays and your poetry about joy and delight never sound gooey or indulgent, or I mean, I guess you have such a finely tuned ear for that, or how do you avoid it? How do you think about it?
I don't know that I'm thinking about the gooey, but I'm thinking about us dying. That's kind of the thing, you know? I wonder if that's the thing. It's sort of like, oh, okay, that's like I love bunnies. I'm never just talking about bunnies, you know? I'm never just talking about the persimmon.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
No. That's not enough.
Well, I think the sentimental or the gooey, there's a million ways that we sort of, that would require that, and I think that original question I was sort of talking about, that person saying like, how can you write about joy, or how can you be thinking about joy at a time like this? I think their relationship to the idea of joy is a kind of sentimental, gooey
Yes.
notion of joy. And if you're talking about, as I am, I think at nearly every turn, the fact that we're going to die. That's what I'm talking about, And so when I'm talking about joy, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about a kind of simplified, or what I think of as like a childish, immature notion of like happiness and, like achievement and like accomplishment and like getting stuff. I'm not talking about that. Like, I'm talking about how we tend to each other in the midst of our dying, which is ongoing, ever ongoing. I don't know, it just feels like that's not inclined to gooiness.
No. No, that's true. I was looking for this note that I made about your sweet Aunt Butter that you put into one of your essays.
Oh, yeah.
She talks about what is it? If you're laughing, you're dying, or I'm dying, get over here. Or tell me a little bit about.
Yeah,
that's so.
It's great.
It's such a great contrast, and I got it instantly. Were you able to find it?
Yeah, I'll just read that paragraph.
Great. Okay.
This is an essay on laughter, and it starts off with my buddy Dave, who makes me laugh a lot, telling me that when I laugh, I look like I'm dying.
That's right.
And you can imagine that's a pretty good point of departure for my consideration of joy. My sweet Aunt Butter, who is 94, please tell no one I told you that, and has chronic lung disease, is, well, usually when you're 94, you are dying more clearly than when you are, say, 24, or say, 48. Laughed when we talked on the phone recently and told me I needed to get out there to see what it was like, getting old like that, which a lot of our people do. I think she meant living long, yes, but she also meant dying long. Her whole generation of siblings is alive. Not anymore, 2 are gone. 2 are left.
Huh.
The baby is 90, the eldest 98, though the generations below have not fared quite as well. My father died at 58, and his babyest brother at 35. A cousin my age, gone. Others of us youngers, pretty banged up. Aunt Butter coughed, said, I ain't shit, meaning I'm weak, I'm dying. Then she laughed and coughed a little more, then giggled and said, you have to come see this baby. This might be you.
Oh, that's just great. Thank you. Thank you for that. You also write about how joyful your mother's laughter is, and I want to read this. This is hilarious. She puts her head into her hand and starts gasping. She'll try to talk, and she might drool a little. Tears will run down her face. Her voice gets high and wispy. She is in the throes. She is a leaking sack of delight. Oh my gosh, that's so good. You know what I was thinking about as I read that? My the side of my mother's family made a lot of home movies. And in most of those movies is like an experience of this. Somebody just starts laughing and it's contagious, and it just reminded me of how meaningful watching that is, and how fleeting and ephemeral that moment was, and we didn't know it.
Totally. Oh my God, so beautiful.
Do you have home movies of your family?
My Uncle Bennett, who's 100, was an avid movie taker. And so hopefully I'll be able to share with my cousin, have access to those movies. I remember at my Uncle Keith's funeral, him taking movies, and all the time when we'd be out there. This is in Youngstown, Ohio. Yeah, God. I have to tell you, when you said that, I was like, oh, if that was my home movies, that I had access to, I'd be like writing books where I'm just describing.
Really?
Yeah, I'd just be like, because even as you were reading that about my mother, and I just finished another essay where I realized I described the ways my friends laugh. There's something so lovely about the description of people's laughter, and it kind of evokes laugh. It makes you laugh.
Yeah.
You know, it makes you want to laugh. Yeah. Yeah.
One last essay?
Yeah.
Great.
So this is in the longest essay in the book, actually. It's called Grief Sweet. And it kind of starts off as an essay ostensibly about, it starts off in football, actually. But it's kind of football, masculinity, grief, et cetera. And at this point, I think I'm sort of trying to consider my mother's grief when my father died, which was also my own grief when my father died, and my grief at my mother's grief. The griever knows or comes to know again and again that it's not only my beloved friend, grandchild, dog, lover, tree, sibling, auntie, teacher, parent, relationship, belief, home, glacier, species that is changed or gone. Because when that one thing changed, everything changed. Light through the trees in October, now different. The sound of the playground, making love, pushing the cart through the aisles of the store. Dreams, the Eagles game on Sunday, holidays, a walk by the river, celebration, changing the sheets, taking a nap, cooking a meal, reading a book, the future, the past. All of it has changed. That is what the griever is metabolizing, which, metabolizing how everything has changed, is not, how could it be, obedient to a clock or calendar, nor a mandate to move on or snap out of it or get over it or pull oneself together. It seems to me that grief is not gotten over, it is gotten into. And the griever teaches us or reminds us there is no pulling it together. There are only degrees or expressions of falling apart. Because grieving, alert to connection, luminous with it, is never only one person's experience. In fact, I think it is the case that grieving, or the griever, consciously or not, connects to all of grief and to all grievers, and which is perhaps why there are some traditions in which the griever is held in constant vigil for a long time. Those traditions understand the griever is entering the oceanic sorrow, is drifting into it. And those traditions know, connected as we are obligated to keep an eye on each other as the waters of grief close behind us. Which serves little purpose for, or maybe more to the point, is a logjam or a barricade, or maybe even more to the point, a threat to a culture, a country, a net of stories, a way that has canonized the story of the rugged individual, the self-made, the need-nothing, bootstrapping, solitary conqueror dude, a culture that will do anything to preserve that story, which conveniently obscures the systemic, patently false though it is, the need-nothing, a figment of the nightmare imagination. Because, among other things, get back to work. But just as important to the prohibition on grief, I suspect, I believe, is the understanding that what the grievers bring back to us, in addition to the ways their wet faces carry the light, is the fact that if we become likewise infected or subsumed, which can happen at any moment, indeed it ought to, right now, terrifying though it is, everything will change, and for good.
I need y'all to sing this one with me. Unapologetically. Sing it again. Unapologetically. One more time. Unapologetically. This is the actual last time. unapologetically, yeah. I'm not explaining myself too much anymore. The tears I cry ain't up for discussion. The threads that I see connecting all things are magic and golden, and I'll stand here and hold them. I'm tired of folk looking at me, not seeing. 'Cause shiny and pretty is shitty, not glowing. This firework is also fireside, and if you know it, you know it. So I'll stand here and be all of me. Here we go, unapologetically. This light that you see will keep on shining. Here we go, unapologetically. Here we go, unapologetic, keep on shining. Here we go, unapologetic, even while I'm crying. Here we go, unapologetic, while I'm dying. One more time, unapologetically, yeah. This here moonchild gives that good sunlight is dazzling and burning and warming and illuminating and invigorating, and I ain't afraid of what makes home in the shadows. And I don't believe in letting no sleeping dogs lie, 'cause I'm tired of the lying, tired of biting my tongue, tired of fighting and all of the battles that need to be won. But I still know who I am, daughter of water and land, held in the ancestors' hands, fully enough as I am. I'll stand here and be all of me. Sing it with me, unapologetically, yeah. This light that you see will keep on shining. Here we go, unapologetically. I'll stand here and be all of me. Sing it with me, unapologetically. This light that you see will keep on shining. Sing it out, unapologetically. Yeah. Keep on shining, even while I'm crying, yeah. Till I'm dying. One more time, unapologetically. Nice, thank you.
Mayada. That was so good. That's the first ever sing-along at Talking Volumes. I am impressed that she got people to sing. Wow, that's not easy. All right, time for some questions from the audience, okay? We'll bring the house lights up. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll come over with a microphone. Boy, people are scattered up into there too. Okay, I thought I saw a hand in the, oh yeah, right, sorry about it, right over there. All right.
Hi, I'm Julie. Hey. Really great to be in this space with you. I'm wondering, I know the structure is really common for readings and for authors to share their work, but if there was a new way, if there was an ideal way for you to share your work with people that was not this, do you have an idea? Is there something that you would want to try?
You said, is there an ideal way for me to share my work?
Yeah, that's not this structure of like the audience and the presenter or the reader and the people sitting.
What do you have in mind?
I don't know.
She sounds like she's got some ideas.
I don't know. I think, I was interested in what you were saying about teaching, about this, these ways in which we are isolated from each other sometimes in traditional learning settings. I think this can sometimes be one of them. You are literally elevated on a stage.
Yeah.
We are sitting, sometimes I think this kind of traditional stage structure, I feel like as an audience member sometimes keeps me silent when I would maybe like yell or whistle or like, so are there other ways, are there other dynamic ways that you have thought about or have shared your work?
Yeah, for sure. That's a beautiful question. It's a great, compelling question, yeah. This is super fun. It's fun to be, I like to be in very small rooms with other people, very tight rooms. Makes me very happy. I like to be part of collaborative readings, you know? I love that this was a collaboration, you know? I really love being at kind of group readings. And I also like the more and more, like, these days, I like being in, mainly I like being in space with people. That's the main thing. So, like, even at this point, this feels like, man, how nice that we're in physical presence with each other. Yes. So that's a few. Yeah, like the kind of the group reading, the tight reading, the basement reading, the living room reading. All those things are like the best things, the reading at the reunion, at the family reunion, that three of the people are, yeah. Thank you for your question.
One of the things that we were talking about downstairs was what a pleasure it is to have people come back, into the fits together, shoulder to shoulder, and the kind of thing, the energy that happens in a room that is just hard to reproduce, in a studio or.
Yeah, and to your question, it's
right.
sort of like, the pleasure in part to reading, to giving readings. I like to give readings. Not everyone likes to give readings. But is to, like, when we were talking about this, is to listen to people listening. And like I was saying about the, giving readings, like learning how to do that, there's such a pleasure in that. It feels like you're hearing your work when you hear other people hear your work, which feels delightful. It also is delightful to me to be on the other side of that. I love being on the other side of that.
Yeah, we were saying, sometimes you'll hear somebody in the audience gasp, and then everybody's attention kind of changes, or a laugh ripples at an unexpected point.
There was a laughter over here that sounded like a teacher laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where was that teacher?
And then that prompted you to ask
right there?
How many people were teachers, and there was applause on account of
right.
We kind of changed the tenor of the conversation in some way.
Right. Question right there in the front. Are you a teacher?
Teacher counselor.
Ah, okay. Wow.
So wondering, since you've given your students kind of a carte blanche in your classes, what have they done as an example of caring for one another while they're grasping their A tightly to their chest?
Good question.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I don't think they grasp their A very tightly to their chest. I think if I understand it right, they know me probably enough by now. I'm thinking like I'm teaching a grad class right now, and they just are like, all right, well, let's get to work. Among the things that they produce, and these are real things, they don't ask for permission to go to the bathroom, which to me feels like really important. If they come late, they don't feel like ashamed, like they've done something wrong, late, whatever. They also, this feels very moving to me, actually. I've been on the road, so I've been like zooming into class for a little bit. And the students were like, hey, can we just get together and we'll Zoom you in? They want to be together, They also, and I don't know, it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had this conversation. And the conversation was, maybe it was 4 weeks ago. The conversation was like an hour talking about our needs. Mm. And people just sort of talking about their difficulty expressing their needs or what some of their needs are, And it was just like an hour of these people talking about their needs. We also talked about a book, and we did some writing. But to me, the fact that we are caring for and tending to one another's, honoring, witnessing each other's needs was like, that's like we did it. We did it, Like, I don't care if you memorize something. I care that you're like practicing and teaching me how to care for each other.
What did the administration say when you said, this is how I want to do this?
I did not say that. I wasn't talking to anyone about it. I just.
Do they know how this works?
I don't know. I wrote this book.
They might not have known until the book. Wow.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
great.
I don't know who's checking up at this point. And I say it in the book. I say I didn't do this before I had tenure. That was part of why I wanted to quit teaching. Actually, it's part of why I wanted to quit teaching.
Question right over there.
I wonder how you feel about the difference between resiliency and indifference.
Well, say it again.
The difference between resiliency and indifference in terms of what we've been talking about, or what you've been talking about, Joy, because they can be conflated, I think, at times.
Resiliency and indifference. How can they be conflated?
I think joy can look like indifference at times when, if it's intentional, it's very resilient.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's an awesome question. It would never occur to me in some way, and I think maybe that's because it's such a good question. Partly, indifference is such a sort of, it's so far outside of my consideration, which is partly why it's such a good question. But I think of this practice that I'm talking about or wondering about is, in a way, such a resilient practice, and it's born of the exact opposite of indifference. It's born of a profound. It's weird that word, the opposite, is not it's not difference. It's not, but it's born of the opposite of indifference, and which is part of why and part of my question, part of the study of the book is how these different practices like skateboarding or pickup basketball or gardening or orcharding and stuff like that they're all these structures in these practices that are caretaking structures that are fundamentally understanding that we actually come back to need, that know that we need stuff of each other. We need care, we need support, we need help. And joy seems to be absolutely born of that, born of the understanding that if we come back to the thing of we're all heartbroken, means that we all need our hearts to be tended to. Then indifference is completely, it's just it's a different thing. But I love that sort of question of sometimes, which is probably the question, probably coming back to that first question, sometimes with someone to be well, why are you talking about joy? It seems like indifference. No, I'm not talking about that. When I'm talking about joy, it's understanding the horror. It's born of the horror. It's born despite and in the midst of, because, we don't get out of that. Beautiful question, thank you.
Yeah, question right over there.
Hi, so I really enjoyed hearing you talk about joyfulness and being joyful in the face of adversity and because of adversity. I'm a primary care physician, and I see a lot of patients who are joyful in the face of healthcare adversity because of their spirituality and their religion, and the two are not interchangeable, but I just wondered if you could speak to that link between spirituality and joyfulness and being able to see the joy in life when you are faced with adversity because of your spirituality. Do you see that? Have you seen that in the people you've spoken to?
Well, I suspect it's sort of what you were saying, that it's about connection. If you know you're connected to something more than yourself, your own experience it's not the only experience. It's sort of, it's connected to other people. I had a cousin who died a few weeks ago, and he had MS for 45 years, I think, 40 years for sure. And it was amazing. He was just such a sort of joyful dude, just really interested in what was going on. And it would have been neat to ask him, like, how is it that you're able to do that? I don't know what his particular spiritual practice was, or if he would relate to spirit in that way. But I do think this question of joy that I'm thinking about is very much, if it emerges from a fundamental understanding that we're connected, that feels to me like a kind of spiritual understanding, in part because you can't necessarily see the connection. And so you look for 1 second, and then you can see it everywhere, So yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah, that's what I would ask. Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of what you said earlier about kind of that awareness of suddenly there's a luminousness to the connection, and you get this glimpse of that luminosity, and then maybe you're unaware of it again for a while. I mean, I don't, does that make any sense about what you were asking? No. Okay.
Yeah, why don't you ask a
Yes.
follow-up question? Do you want to ask more?
Oh God.
You don't have to.
It's just that piece of like, joy comes from sorrow. Joy comes from this place of you can't know joy unless you know deep despair. Like
Right.
and
I don't know about despair. With sorrow. Yeah. I think they're different.
but to fully experience joy in amongst feeling sorrow.
Yeah.
Like I've seen that in
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. I mean, I think about, this. When my father was dying, and he died hard for 5 months. He died hard, and then but I went down there, I remember one time, and he was, lost 40 pounds or whatever, and he was like a big dude, became like a skinny and very weak dude. And just couldn't really, just say all the things. He had liver cancer. And I have a toothpick a lot. And I learned it from my dad. And he saw the toothpick on my ear one time, and he said, "Man, can I have that toothpick?" And the way that he was kind of just doing that, it was such an experience. And it was the experience not of someone who's gonna who felt great and could go to the store and get some more toothpicks. Maybe this time the tea tree toothpicks, It wasn't that. It was a dude who, whether or not he knew it, this might be one of the last times he was gonna use a toothpick, certainly the last time that he was gonna use his son's toothpick, And it was such, if I could have that, I do have it. I was gonna say, if I could have that look of my father, it's like in a bottle, I do. It was just beautiful. It's just, and it was that thing. It was like, I don't know that, I don't know. For me, I can say for me, and I think I was witnessing something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Question right back there.
Hi. I just was curious about your definition of bewilderment, because it was so magical, that room of everyone all together, and wanted to hear more.
Not knowing what's going on. But fundamentally not knowing what's going on. I think, that sort of thing. And I think that too, I wonder if that's part of the connection, that one of the wisdoms of all kinds of people, the people the dying and the grievers and all these other, is that it's a kind of bewilderment, because what you thought was is no longer is. I wonder if it's something like that. But when I talk about bewilderment in classrooms, I think the job of a classroom is to not the job, but one of the things that we might do in a classroom is to unknow ourselves, just like in relationships. I feel like I'm learning this all the time, that part of the practice of being in a relationship is not to assert what you know about someone else, but is to ask who they are, or what they're feeling. And I feel like we have to do that of ourselves as well, all the time. And the classroom as a I mean, life obviously is a place of bewilderment, but the classroom as a place where we can actually gather and honor the fact that we don't know what the hell is going on inside or out, and that we get to kind of like wonder about it and, come to some temporary footing periodically, probably. Yeah, but again, let me just say Fannie Howe's essay, Bewilderment, that's guides my understanding of that word a lot.
Should we do 2 more questions and then the book signing? That be all right? Okay, right. I'm sorry. Right over there, and then.
Then one's
right.
Yeah.
And is there somebody down
right here.
down front?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, right there.
Hello. Not to change the subject very violently, but my question is a little bit more about writing as a process. I think that as a writer, it can be very difficult to have grace for the ways that your writing has changed. And I was really curious how you've seen your writing evolve recently or from whenever you started, based on what you've read and listened to and what's shaped it, and how you've been able to, if you have been able to have grace for evolving as a writer.
Wait, so what do you mean? You don't feel that way?
You
sound like you write.
I'm here with my creative writing class, but this might just be a me thing, but I'm very much a perfectionist, and I often read things I wrote in the past, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I wrote that, or I just think like, I could have done that better, and obviously that's the process of writing, is doing it better over time, but I haven't been able to grasp having grace for the process that is very messy of being a writer.
Totally. I'm laughing because I'm like, with writing, it's one thing. It's like, how about being a person?
All right.
But let me think. How do I answer that? One, I'll just say, have grace. I mean, that's not going to help, but have some grace. But the other thing is like, I wonder about perfectionism, which I don't think I'm anymore very afflicted with in my writing, in part because I try to approach it not knowing what it's going to or could possibly be. I feel like perfectionism often comes from a sort of expectation of what something might be. And I feel like over the years, so this is a thing that's changed in my writing. It's not always like this, been like this. I don't know. I approach it bewildered. I try to anyway. And so I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm flummoxed all the time, and and I'm surprised, and and I feel like that approach allows me to sort of avoid the relationship to expectations. And it might also, thinking about my work now, might allow me to avoid the relationship to expectation, even that I used to have as a kid, I wonder, like when I was a younger writer. Because now I'm sort of looking at everything as sort of process, just part of the thing. Now when I read stuff that I wrote that, I wouldn't write now, I think of it more as like the way that I got to be able to write this thing I'm writing now, which is also to say, like, I'm grateful to it, Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, question there and then a question down front.
Hi, I was really delighted by your stories of the orchard, and especially your experiences in inefficiency. Oh, yeah. I'm also part of a land stewardship group that is very inefficient. Yeah, here with one of my comrades in that, and
all right,
the stories of the 3-hour meetings and the tangents and the interrupted by babies. It's really beautiful, but it also, I feel like there's this tension of like delighting in the inefficiency, which requires unlearning the shame of or the resistance to the inefficiency, because these systems that we live in, like capitalism and college and with land projects, like navigating ordinances and zoning, they don't want inefficiency.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious just what your relationship to that tension has been, or how you've practiced moving through that. Because I think, there are so many things that are dying, and there are so many things that we're trying to birth, and that tension is really present right now.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know. I feel like I'm interested in the seams, in all the seams in that stuff, like in the seams of like, there's an there's an essay in this book that's all about inefficiency, and it's about time actually, and it's really about it's about time, but it's the way that the essay starts off is because I go to a coffee shop, my favorite coffee shop, and there's a sign that says, be back in 5 minutes or something like that. And that's the kind of departure, because partly I'm like celebrating whoever it was who was like gonna go have a cigarette instead of doing their job, And I feel like I wonder if part of the, like I don't have an answer for your question, but I can wonder with you. I'm more interested in that. I wonder if part of the thing is to like witness the seams in the kind of efficiency machine where we are able to just like not be under its sway, or like these little cracks in it, like, which might mean things that we're doing, or maybe it means noticing when other people are like blowing something off. Or not doing something on time, or not being perfect, Like, that's a kind of inefficiency. It's a kind of like refusal of a particular relationship to progress and accomplishment. So yeah, I don't have a great way to say anything about that, but I feel like if we had 2 hours, we could like together just be like, oh yeah, and this is people being inefficient, and this is people being inefficient. Care is almost always inefficient. Like I think of like a pickup basketball court, and some of the most beautiful, bless you, moments in a court are like when, one of my favorite basketball court experiences was like a good court, we're playing, these two kids, they're two very good ball players, boom, they get into it, one punches the other in the face, one of the older guys like takes him out of the court. It's one of their dads, he's still like a very good basketball player, and the other kid takes him outside of the court. There's like, for those of you who know pick up basketball, there's like a 5-game wait. It's a Saturday morning, it's like May or June, it's beautiful. It's a good court, people come from all over. And it's like, it might be 10 minutes that this dad talks to these kids. Not like, I don't know what he's saying, but it's 10 minutes. And the whole court is like, all right, that's what we're doing. The most important thing right now is that these kids know how to love one another, how to deal with one another, whatever. It was so inefficient, Like if it was a college court, you'd be thrown out in practice, would get right back to it, There would not be, that's not entirely true, like sometimes there's, but witnessing those things and being like, oh, that's how it happens like that. Oh, okay, it happens like that. Or even like, I just stumbled onto the thing of like, maybe it's about care. Maybe care is usually very inefficient, It's inefficient to ask someone what they need. I don't know. Yeah, we could talk about it. Thank you.
One last question right there. And by the way, again, a signing right up here on the stage, right afterwards. No?
I was curious about the river you talked about with Philip Glass and your relationship to that river of creativity that you can sometimes have access to dip into. And as a writer and artist, sometimes I feel this urgency that I've got to dip into it as much as possible, and then realizing I'm never going to do all the projects I have the ideas of. And so it's like, well, that can't be the point to like hog it or, like gulp it down. And so just curious about your relationship to that river.
I know it, because it kind of connects to that inefficiency question too. And you're also lucky, like there's a lot of folks who, and it always puzzles me because I'm like you, I'm like, man, I got 8 books in the trunk, like I'm waiting. None of which might be good, maybe 1 out of the 8 is good, and it might be ridiculous, I had this one book idea, and it was, I have a dream, a common dream, a recurring dream, and it's that there's a veggie burger, a great veggie burger and French fries that I know I've had, but I can't get back to it. And I thought, and you know, like this is one of my great ideas. Oh, I could write a book about trying to find that veggie burger. But anyway, I don't know. I'm in your boat, and I sort of wonder about it. I'm in the boat of having, like, you know, at this moment anyway, kind of access and a lot of ideas, which is really just a lot of questions. Just have a ton of questions that feel like worthy of like hanging around in for a while. Like they'd be fun to hang around in for a while. Fun, that's another thing for the young writers. Fun. That hogging it question, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What was the kind of worry? What was the question? I was just like, yeah, I get it. Say it again.
Like your relationship to that river of creativity, and if sometimes I feel the urgency to try to access as much as possible, like gulping it, versus maybe there's a different kind of relationship that isn't about seeing through all those ideas. Like it's not about like a quantity of projects.
Yeah. I think maybe if the relationship is something like gratitude to it and for it, that might, like I feel grateful for my questions, I can say that. I feel grateful that my questions can like help me do these things that feel really fun and meaningful to me. I wonder if gratitude is because if I hear you right, the sort of sense of like, I gotta get it all done, it's a little bit of a progress thing, you know? And I get it too, I totally get that too, because I can feel that way too. And it's seductive. It's getting stuff done is like, you know, it's told, you know, like, you know, I like to make fun of, you know, people who say like, own the day, or like, smash the day, murder the day, like. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I just want to like have a day, spend some time with my friends in the day, maybe work on a poem in the day, you know, but there you go. That's the last answer. It was worthless. I hope you appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here. Ross, thank you.